Well, the Iowa caucuses have concluded, and already the battle lines are being drawn within the conservative movement. Nikki Haley is declaring it a two-person race, despite her finishing a dismal third and basically having no enthusiasm, I guess, beyond a select handful of people who are not really voting for her, but they're just voting against Trump.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
And Ron DeSantis has basically been beat by over 30 points. I mean, it was just a whopping defeat, and yet he is still maintaining a victory as well. Donald Trump obviously emerged the dominant winner with an over 50% victory, and Vivek Ramaswamy also dropped out, conceded the race, and immediately embraced Trump and is now going to be doing campaign events with him. Well, depending on where you lie in this mass array of factionalism, whether you're a Haley person or a DeSantis person or a Ramaswamy person or a Trump person, everyone is interpreting these events differently. But I think fundamentally, there are just some greater things, some greater ideas that all of us, regardless of our factional affiliation, regardless of our political biases, should actually look towards as a conservative movement in order to build a pathway forward. Because division, my friends, is actually healthy. I hate it. I actually abhor it when people say, I hate that we're so divided. No, division is both a natural necessity and a social necessity. If you're not socially divided, then that means everyone will be the same. And if everyone is really the same, then that means you're going to ignore human difference. You're going to ignore cultural difference. You're going to ignore social difference. You're going to do the same thing that multiculturalism does, which inevitably leads to chaos because it is disconnected with reality. If everyone is naturally, just needs to be unified, you're going to ignore differences of temperament. You're going to ignore differences of values. You're going to ignore things that are actually very important for the functioning of society. Division, when it is used as a fine-tooth comb to refine the rough edges of a particular concept or a particular movement, is healthy. But a reckless division, where it is just needless fighting, chopping at the bit to get at someone's throat, that's unhealthy. We should learn the difference if we are going to actually understand the proper social dynamics needed to move forward, not as a country, but also as an intellect, because this is a very important concept to know. But there are 5 lessons that I have for everyone in the conservative movement as it relates to the Iowa caucuses. Number 1, I think that Vivek Ramaswamy did the honorable thing by dropping out of the race and basically giving the reins over to the only other pro-America first candidate in the race, that's Donald Trump. Regardless of what you think about Donald Trump or not, from a strategic standpoint, from a moral standpoint, and a political standpoint, it just makes sense. Because Ramaswamy ran his campaign as an extoller of America First ideas. So it would have been incredibly odd if he would have then embraced DeSantis or, God forbid, Haley or anybody else, because neither of them reflect that vision. So that makes total sense to me. And again, I think that this is part of that Ramaswamy being that fine-tooth comb that actually refines the rough edges of something through division, as opposed to needlessly attacking someone through division. If people want to know how to practice the art of political sculpting via division, look at how Ramaswamy ran his campaign. He was running against Trump, but he did not attack Trump. He did not try to destroy Trump. Instead, he tried to build off of and refine the rough edges that are around Trump's presentation and Trump's ideas. That's how you practice division in a constructive way. And so now that Ramaswamy is on the Trump train, the America First agenda is set, the goals are clear, and the energy of that particular movement is now palpable. That's how you build a political coalition. And by the way, this has nothing to do just with the situation right now. Look at any situation in general. If you're trying to build a coalition, you have to keep the principle of refinement and constructive criticism alive, or else it just does not work. Lesson number 2. The reality on the ground when it comes to political matters and when it comes to anything really is vastly different from social media or X. I believe that as we progress towards a more digital future, a more interconnected future, which you could dispute that term, are we more interconnected now? Are we more separate now? I would take the latter, but just for the sake of ease, I'm going to use that term. A more interconnected future, social media will become the medium that political campaigns are conducted through. We already saw the first instance of this in 2008 when Obama Girl really helped President Obama win the election. 2012, there was a lesser effect. 2016, there was a big effect with Trump rising, him being censored by the mainstream media, but then rising through social media. And now we're going to see this continue. But even though we have seen this gradual increase of social media's importance in our elections, it's still not reflective totally of the total sentiments of the American population, because only a particular kind of person uses social media, and only a particular kind of person uses especially political social media. And so we should all understand that, and online commentators who look at ratings and look at views and look at shares should all understand this is not necessarily reflective of a broader political truth. It may simply reflect what a certain portion of the population who follow this stuff intently actually thinks. And I think that going forward, if we understand that and we grasp that, we'll be better off, in my opinion, in actually understanding the impact of social media as time goes on. But speaking of social media and the media in general, it's probably good to understand that in our political process, we are dominated by mainstream media constructs. The Iowa Caucus is a mainstream media construct, the first in the nation status that is given by the corporate media to Iowa, has absolutely no merit beyond the paradigm constructed by the mainstream media that binds the thinking of Americans, binds the thinking of political observers to see politics in a very linear way and not to actually consider a holistic standpoint on politics. People will say, if someone does not win the Iowa caucuses, that's a bad omen for their campaign. Well, is Iowa reflective of America? Why is it a bad omen? It's a bad omen because the media paradigm, which has now influenced political perception, has influenced donor perception, and therefore has imprinted itself falsely upon political reality, makes it so significant. But in all reality, every state, every person in a classically Republican system gets a voice and gets a vote. Not just one state, not just a handful of states on Super Tuesday, not just anything. Every single state person gets a voice. And yet not every single person will have a chance to use their voice in the process due to how the corporate media has constructed a perception about the primary system. It's going to be important for us going forward to break free from the old world media paradigm mindset if you wish to truly understand politics for what it is and what it should be, as opposed to what it has been conveyed as by certain forces. Number 4 is probably uncontroversial. Donald Trump has a commanding lead of the GOP into November. You do not get over 50% in the Iowa caucuses, and most importantly, you do not command as much support as he does from the grassroots without having such a commanding lead going into November. Even if you double DeSantis and Nikki Haley's margins tonight by themselves, they don't even come close to touching Trump. This is a harsh statistical fact that people that are in the Never Trump train will have to learn. And this is regardless of what you think about him. This is not a value statement. This is merely a statement of fact. And this suggests that a significant portion of the party that is Never Trump is rather astroturf in the case of Nikki Haley, or just really ineffectual. I mean, this is someone who's gone through so many convictions, who's gone through a lot of turmoil, who's gone through things that would have buried any other candidate. And yet he has managed to come out on top, which is amazing to me. The 5th point, my last point before I close, is actually perhaps the most philosophically important one. And it's that public corrective is the only way a republic can function. Trump the personality, Vivek the personality, Nikki Haley, DeSantis, they don't matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is the phenomenon of grassroots populism and what that represents for America. That is far more interesting to me. And the current iteration of conservative populism represents the failure of the conservative movement to provide focus post the Reagan consensus. Some of you may have never heard that term. During the Reagan consensus, which was born of the sort of early stages of conservatism, the Goldwater era conservatism, where the focus was on destroying communism and destroying collectivism, you had political policy oriented around those philosophical aims. But once the USSR fell, and once the conservative movement no longer had an enemy to face, there was no focus. So instead of going towards a different ideological foe or just dialing back and doubling down on first principles, the conservative movement post-1990s became hijacked by neoconservatism, became hijacked by a Fox sort of a system of economic thinking that integrates the free market with government control, therefore not letting it actually be a free market, but instead making it a mixed economy, a mixed market that adheres to the interests of global elites and global institutions. This is what we saw with NAFTA, for example, where it was a free trade agreement constructed around limiting premises that benefited a particular set of people and didn't actually, as free trade is supposed to, benefit the people who wish to freely trade and sell across borders in the world. And so these interests hijacked the conservative movement. Neoconservatism slept in and then began to gear the conservative movement towards this emphasis on military adventurism and conquering America's enemies and defeating an abstraction called terrorism. And for decades, that's where conservative energy was directed to. And this, beneath it, created this sort of swamp-like machine that learned their lines, that had a very particular set of principles and viewpoints that they believed in, that kept Washington running in a mediocre way and limited the context of debate to only include that which was politically advantageous, therefore also impacting the minds of the people. And then after this, the Tea Party comes in. But then the Tea Party was hijacked by this same neoconservative infrastructure that had kept politics mediocre by the way of John Boehner coming in, and John Boehner continuing to the mediocrity throughout the government by keeping the debt ceiling, raised and working with the Obama administration to do all kinds of horrendous things to our economy. And then Trump was the answer for a lot of people to the failure of the Reagan consensus to provide focus and vision after the Cold War. He was a response to the establishment that rose up after that unfortunate failure and sought to dominate the minds of good-willed Americans, and he became a rejection of that flawed system. The vampiric neoconservative war establishment, which hijacked the consensus conservative movement, essentially ushered in years of just horrible politics, horrible economics, and military adventurism, and Trump was the answer. It was public corrective that set that movement on its heels and is now currently burying it as we speak. It has some last gasps left, but it won't be around for too long. The Iowa Caucuses and the voting in general is a form of public corrective. Even if I think that sometimes it's influenced by incorrect media perception, it's a form of public corrective. And more generally, if we're going to maintain a classical republic, if we're going to maintain a government that is filtered through checks and balances and bound to first principles, that is meant to serve these general ideas, these general philosophic aims, and not to be a tyrannic force for the majority or a tyrannic force for the elite, we're going to have to begin practicing public corrective more in a peaceful way, of course, but in a way that is compelling, in a way that will challenge authority, in a way that will challenge authority in the spirit of our nation. And we can do that by continuing to do a few things that I think is going to be more important than supporting any one candidate during any election year. We can do that by studying history, studying philosophy, remaining morally convicted, and challenging authority at every single corner when it is possible and when it can be done in a non-violent manner. My friends, allow these lessons to permeate your mind and be absorbed into your soul, and I assure you, regardless of who wins the presidency, America will have a very bright future to look forward to. I'm certain of it. But if we don't exercise our God-given faculties towards righteous ends, towards the ends of our constitutional republic, towards the ends of our system of natural law and first principles, towards the ends of restoring good governance and moral righteousness within our leaders, then unfortunately, no one, not a president, not anything, can save us from ourselves. Don't be your own worst enemy, my friends. Study history, study philosophy, support this channel, donate, like, share, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can to get this message out there. And most importantly, my friends, stay pensive. Bye, guys.